Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Okay, this is the next installment in my Tulip Bevel project, and we're moving on to the carving phase of this. This is a direct carved job. It's not pointed from a model or a maquette or anything. What we did a simple composition sketch, developed it with the patron. He had, stick figure type stuff that he sent and some ideas. And so I put together the composition and did just a quick cartoon, and then did clay maquettes, just did a clay sketch-up of the right and left. I went by, tried to study some tulips and look for ideas that would be durable in stone, because there's some tulips that have detail along the petals that just isn't suitable for stone. It doesn't mean I can't carve it, but I shouldn't, because it'll just break. So we did these, found some tulips, worked with one of the books in the archive. You always look for good material to have. Went through and looked at lots and lots of tulips and found this lucette tulip that actually has multiple blooms on a single stem, which was what we were wanting, because I didn't want to have several stems down here. I wanted to have this come together as a single stem, as a termination. So we're working on this one. This also had very nice rounded petals where they round in. They're not frilly, they're not separated or divided, and so it looked like a good compromise. So that was the lucette tulip that we used to develop the clay, and that's what we're going to carve on the stone. Now, I don't necessarily have any lucette tulips handy, so I went down to the local big box store that I don't usually shop at, and they had a couple of forest tulips. Now you can see that the petals on this, the edge of the blossom, the actual petals are pretty frilly. I'm more interested in the foliage at this point. And so, because it's going to take me a little bit to produce the foliage on this stone, this one's probably going to be passed in terms of the blossoms. So I bought two while I was there, and see if this one will push up some stems and buds in the time necessary. And this should help, even though they're not the exact varietal. These should give me a pretty good understanding and be able to develop some fairly accurate, realistic looking petals and leaves for the foliage. I think people forget, this is granite, okay? This isn't cellulose, this isn't water, this isn't going to be a real tulip. This is going to be a representation of a tulip. And the goal with this is to have a viewer look at it and say, wow, look at those tulips. Not look at it and say, those are real tulips. That's always a compliment, but whether you're carving a person in stone or a tulip in stone or anything else, it's stone. And so your job is to produce a result that conveys that communication or that message of what it's supposed to be, because that'll make it more pleasurable and it'll demonstrate better to the viewer. So I'm going to start working all this back, and we'll take some video along the way, and should be a really pretty stone. So working on the Tulip Bevel, going to start carving. Okay, I've started carving a little bit. I wanted to point something out. This is a design consideration. Now, this is approximately the height, finished height. It'll be a little bit shorter than this. If I carve this and shape this and leave this now to where this is all by itself and just sticking up like the end of this chisel, it's probably going to get bumped while I'm working. It's probably going to break, and that's not good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into shape, get it all tuned up to the width that I want. I'm going to leave this extra mass on here to support it until the end. And it would be very dramatic if the end was cut like this chisel, where it was either straight up and down or slightly beveled. That would produce a really nice shadow and really make it look like it's loose, but that'll break. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably tip this edge off so that it's more of an angle cut, like if I cut it like this. So there'll be a bevel right here that'll go down. I can have a little reveal detail line at the bottom where it meets, maybe raise that, undercut it just slightly enough to make a shadow. But have this bevel. That'll make that stem infinitely stronger, so it's more likely to survive long term out in the elements. So that's the kind of thing where we talk about what can be done versus what should be done. I can tip it and cut it like this and make it really dramatic. But in the position that's this, if this was 6 feet off the ground, I wouldn't worry about it. If this is going to be down low, I don't want that. So I'm going to bevel it this way so that my chisel cut goes across like this and make it a lot stronger. Okay, here's another little tip. As I'm working this is normal. You can see right here very easily. Small chisel. That mark right there. Right there. That's a little bit of this grazing material with a chisel rub as I was carving down here. Now, that's not really a problem. You got to be careful not to do too much of it because you don't want to stress this and break it if it was easy to break. But what's going to happen at the end of this job is I need to wash it and I need to acid wash it. This material isn't as big a deal as if I rub part of the steel, tool steel shank on the stone. That'll leave a little bit of iron in the stone, which will rust, which will make a stain, which will be there forever. And so at the end of the job, I have to take the stone and usually, you know, if we, for whatever reason, we'll wash it anyways to brighten it up. But it's important to make sure that it's acid washed real well with the proper acid to eliminate any of this little residual iron that's contaminating the stone that came from the chisel while you're tooling it. When you get down into these narrow parts, especially if you're using a tool that's purchased that has a deep slotted chisel and it's got steel shoulders instead of having this built up grazing rod, it's real easy to have rubs anywhere where it's tight where you've tried to reach in. And if you leave that on the stone, it'll stain it, and then in a short period of time after it's been out in the weather, it'll leave a mark on the stone. Not cool. Can't do that. So you can scrape it off, but invariably you'll miss some of it. So we'll acid wash the whole stone at the end, and that'll take care of any residual little bits of iron or steel from the tools that where we've rubbed it anywhere. So just a little tip. We'll tell you about that in the books. So back to car. Thought I'd take a break to show you a couple things that I've done. Okay, this in the corner needs to be a small dog tag. So in order to make a dog tag that's nice and flat, the easy way to do it is to true this up. Get this all nice and flat and straight. And it's important because this is a piece of metal laying on this curved scotia, there's just a slight scotia, that this be tipped in the approximate same way. It's held up on the edge, so it's probably going to rotate a little bit. So you make that nice flat plane. Now I can draw whatever I want on here for the dog tag, produce the detail in it, and then just take the edges away by pushing down. Most people would carve the dog tag and then they try to straighten it up, and you spend all day chasing your edges because your edges all break off. It's not the way you do it to do it well. You want to do it the easy way, go ahead, get it flat, lay it out, and then just work your edges down, literally with the chisel going back and forth, straight down around the edge. Trim your edges as you need them, but you can just erode the edges away. You're left with a really nice dog tag. got the foliage worked in pretty good. I'm going to start on the other side now. Take it to about the same point. It's not fully undercut. There's a little bit left here. Trying to keep it strong. But I wanted to show, I did a little bit with this blossom here and try to bed it in the way it looked before. It was longer, came to about right here. One of the things people forget about or overlook when they're doing composition work that's going from 2D to 3D especially is that this blossom here, that will be this blossom here, has a given length. I forget, it's about 1 3/4 inches long. Previously, it came out and was flat up to about here. You measure that length, and then you cut that length and sink that length. But then you realize that the element is not long in that direction, it's long at an angled direction. And so you get your 1 3/4 inches on a diagonal, not on a horizontal. And then by the time you figure that out, you wasted all this material because you got way down to it, and you shouldn't have. That really shows up when people do things like faces and they carve an eye or a nose, and they carve away everything in the world around it to 1/2 inch, and then they realize that they just carved off all the material they needed for that eyelid or that nostril or whatever, and you end up with some goofy looking job. So this should look, even in this video, this has been shortened just a little bit here, but even here you should be able to see that this is a lot more round, a lot more plump and full, just like I said it would be. And this is right on the money right here where it needs to be. So I'll crown this off just a little bit, keep sinking that, and when I sink that, that will make this appear to rotate up even higher as this reduces. But this has to reduce to justify with the background. And and then once I get this where I want, I'll leave all this material. I can produce the edge of this leaf. And you need to push this over a little bit. That way I get nice agreement, just like on the model, and not have the Grand Canyon between these two things, because I went ahead and sunk them deep right at the beginning, which isn't the way. You can do it if you want, but this turns out better. Okay, I'm working on the floral now. See, I've got the foliage put together pretty well. Trying to have a little bit of fun with this petal, this leaf here, and turning it in. By doing this and not cutting a hard line here or on the inside, it actually makes it pretty strong, and it looks like several of my leaves here that are rolled up pretty tight up towards the end, especially like that one. And so what this will do is I've got to try to make sure, this is part of when I talk about everything has to land in everything has to finish together. Working these blossoms apart slowly, and by leaving them apart, leaving them together as I work them slowly apart, get my outside shaped really well. This will tune off here and this will come back. They'll just be tangent here a little bit, and that'll look good down at the end, but it'll also help keep them strong. This is probably a little long right here. This has to sink a little bit more. And the top blossom, this is real heavy up on top. But it's all coming together, but I've got to remember, down here is a stem. And that stem has to agree with this material here, because that's where the stem passes through. It also needs to pass under this flower, not through it. So this needs to look like it's high enough, and this is low enough that if that's the case. And I still got a stem here. So I'm going to work with some of this detail. On the clay, I've got this dug down quite a bit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go as deep on this. We'll find out. I'm going to work on it. But I've got a stem here, and a stem here. Now I also have the edge of a leaf right here. And theoretically, that edge of the leaf could fill some of that empty space, so I don't have to drill as much out. It's a little heavier, less chance for water to stand, things to freeze and break. So just working with it. I'll thin these edges up. I'm pretty happy with this undulation. May thin the very edge up. I did fasten the edges of these leaves so that they mimic that white line a little bit on the edge of the real leaves. And then underneath, we'll trim this all the way and blend this so that it's probably will be about a 45-degree angle, and then we'll have a scotia, a curve where it meets the actual ground. Then this can all be taken away while I'm working and on top of this. It's better to leave it a little strong. And got some undulation over here as well. Extra material here to remove. And I'm going to do a little more on these blossoms, and go over and work on these to make sure everything comes together before I do any final cutting, like the tips or the actual petals. So, but I think they look like tulips. They got the nice curves. I want to round that a little bit. That's too straight. So I want to probably play with that a little bit, maybe take a little bit of that corner out, but not too much because it's going to support the dog tag. So we'll see. This may go in here a little bit. We'll look at it. But pretty happy with the way they're coming. Okay, working on the floral. Wanted to show working these blues together as I shape them. You know the white look. You carve them and you develop them more by reduction from one to the other to keep a very tight straight line between them. You can keep them very full and very round. Use something like a channeling tool where you can slot between them. What ends up happening is you lose some of this round volume, you end up with a flat spot, and by the time you chase and curve this over to resolve the flat that's on each side, and you're going to have the rub, or the tool rub, that you'll have to acid wash later, but to resolve that flat, you're apt to lose some of this, especially if you have a chip when you're working that edge down. So I work them off together like that. Did the same thing over here. You can see I've got two very nice blooms that are just barely tangent. I could probably drill through there if I tried. I drill down underneath, on the top and on the bottom, but I don't want to get into the ground. But by leaving them together and working them down to work them apart, after both sides were done, they stay very much in agreement. They're very much like the model, where the model's really close. And they've got very nice volume. I said before to warn about surrendering volume. This big blossom's still really big. I'm gonna try to keep it open, and so I'm gonna work this one together with the one on the other side. But these are comparable. Got nice movement on the foliage. Got nice agreement. They look like tulips. The end here, I'll reduce that and carve that as I go instead of carving it off and then carving in, which is more likely to chip. And so right now they look kind of more like poppies, just in terms of having this pop on this bush on top. But that'll just trim right off very easily. They've got nice forms. I don't think anybody's going to mistake those for something other than tulips. This one's coming together as well. So I'll keep working down, especially this one's a little large. This one has to shrink down to be a nice point. Then I can remove everything underneath. They're coming along well. Form's coming pretty nice there on the right side. The left here, still doing some reduction, but the agreement's pretty good. They match. Probably going to rotate the dog tag here in the corner where this is going to be the actual ring detail, and then the dog tag will be down here. It may be changed from the cloverleaf design that it is on the model, on the sketch. Not really sure. That's what I plan to cut, but if you want something different shaped, then we'll make it round or heart shaped or whatever. But real happy with this form. Don't think there's any mistaking those tulips for something else. So keep working, but it's time to clean it off and take a look. Pretty happy with the way it's coming together. It'll be a real nice, elegant stone. This will probably wrap up this section of the carving, just so we can move on to the next video where I actually do the finish work to complete these tulips and open up the blooms a little bit, delineate or define the different petals, and tool them to match. So we'll wrap this up. But this ends this video of hand carving a tulip bevel with hand carved tulips in Georgia blue granite. And once again, my name is Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio. I'm a granite sculptor. Thanks for stopping by.